català, però soc un americà. Avui tenim un convidat especial i un episodi especial que serà en anglès, o sigui que prepareu-vos. This episode will be in English. I have a special guest coming from nearby where I live, here in the great state of Oregon, Richard Satnick. Hey, Richard, how are you?
Good, thank you. And I hope everybody is well in Catalonia.
Yeah, great. So, Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you come from, and then your relation with Catalonia.
Sure. I grew up in New York City area, but came of age during the Vietnam War, so I began to be interested in various forms of anti-authoritarian ideas. And at some point, I think when I was 17 or 18, I read Orwell's book about the Spanish Civil War and what Catalonia represented as a last bastion of freedom. And it became a kind of a romanticized view in my mind of Catalonia as this special place off in the mists of my memory where I hadn't visited yet, but I still was always interested and almost wished you would start a new rebellion there so I could help. But in any case, it was something that was in the back of my mind for a long time. But then I went on with my life and eventually this was when I was in university. I went on to graduate school, studying anthropology and the evolution of speech and language, primarily by doing research with chimpanzees. So I have some interesting experiences there. But at some point, I read something about the Caganers in just something in passing. I was reading about Barcelona. Oh, I know, I can recall now why, because I was actually interested in Barcelona as an example of interesting urban planning. I had also developed an interest in urban planning when I was in Bloomington, Indiana, and naturally the things you study about how Barcelona has been through its history was also interesting to me because of my fascination with the Catalan history. So at that point, I began reading everything I could get my hands on about Catalonia and about the history of Barcelona. And that's where I just came across this reference to the Caganers, the figure in the nativity scene, which of course was very strange to me, as it is to most Americans. But it appeals to my sense of humor, and naturally I was intrigued enough to say I must go to Catalonia and find out what this mystery is, what these characters mean. So that began 8 or 10 years of visiting Catalonia several times, but of course during Christmas mostly, to ask questions and to meet people and to be an anthropologist about the Catalan culture. So it's an interesting history because as I developed more and more knowledge about Catalonia, I also fell in love with the culture and with the crazy people that are there. And many of the interesting cultural elements were just great mysteries that the more I was there and the more people would explain things to me, I began to understand, and now have many lovely friends there who understand my strange sense of humor and but also understand my interest in the cultural traditions of Catalonia. So it's worked out quite well. I've been able to indulge my interest in Caganers in the various ways that Caganers are more than just a nativity scene figure. And of course, everything else I do is very obsessive. So I started collecting Caganers in great numbers, and now have quite an extensive collection, about 450 Caganers that are in my house in glass cases. And when people come to visit, they are genuinely puzzled. So it's a great expression. It's a great thing to explain. I think I understand it and some of the other Christmas traditions, the cagatillo, and the other things that are similar to it. But it's still something I think is wonderful, and I always enjoy coming to Barcelona to see how somebody will interpret the Caganer either in a public piece of art or there was one time where there was a giant Caganer in a shopping mall, I believe, on the Avenida Diagonal. I think that's where it was. But all of these things are just now part of my history, and to have the ultimate honor is to have a Caganer of myself, which I brought a picture of me done by people in Caldas de Montbui. The Caganer looks quite like me, and it's holding a hamburger because this was the business I was in. I had a hamburger shop in Portland, and this is really quite good. The image is very realistic, so
Right.
I'm impressed and honored, and it's something that I continue to look forward to. If the pandemic were not here, I would be in Catalonia probably in a few weeks, ready for the Santa Lucia market and the festival.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am, stuck in the United States, wishing I were in Catalonia, but we make the best of it. The Casal is an interesting group of people. It helps me feel a little more connected, as I'm sure it does for you guys.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Because the Oregon, we have a bunch of people that we stay in touch. A lot of Catalans. The Catalans are everywhere. Everywhere that I've gone in the U.S., I found Catalans. But let's back up a little bit and explain a little bit about you and how you're not from Catalonia, right? So you're from the U.S. Where did you get started? And you said you had a burger shop. Maybe explain a little bit more about that history.
Yeah, actually, I'm somebody who has been opportunistically an entrepreneur, and many times I've started businesses simply to solve a problem that I would have if somebody wasn't making food the way I wanted to eat it. I start a restaurant and then have other people do the work, and it works out quite well for me. But initially, as I said, I was an anthropologist and went through the PhD program at the University of Chicago, and did some very interesting research on the evolution of language. But I also began to feel that working with chimpanzees in captivity just wasn't the right thing, that chimpanzees don't belong in captivity for the benefit of science or for any benefit, because they are incredibly intelligent, incredibly complex creatures, and they belong back in Africa, not for my benefit. So I kind of had a reaction to my research interests and decided that I really wasn't meant to be a research scientist where you must study things in greater and greater and greater in detail without understanding the big picture. So I eventually said, I don't want to do this, but what can I do to make a living? How do I live? And the first thing I started was a bicycle shop in Atlanta, of all places. And there are several reasons why I chose Atlanta. As I said, I grew up in New York City. So, and my background is sort of Jewish background. So Atlanta is not the place you would expect me to go, but it was a good opportunity. I found a neighborhood that was changing and still inexpensive, and started a very interesting mountain bike specialty store, a very big store. And it's still in Atlanta, I'm pleased to say. It's still there after all these years. But I did this business for a few years, and it's very hard business to generate profit. You work very hard, and you make a good living, but not a great living. So at some point, I thought I should do something else. and a friend of mine was making burritos in Atlanta, and I asked him to organize a new business, and he said no, but I was welcome to his recipes and to the systems. I could copy the systems, but not in Atlanta. So I moved back to Bloomington, Indiana, my first college town, and started a restaurant there called Laughing Planet Cafe. And this is in Bloomington, Indiana. But very quickly after it was successful, I realized that I could offer this opportunity in other places. And I also didn't want to stay in Indiana very long because it's ultimately a very conservative state that doesn't fit my desires. So after I looked around and thought about my interest in urban planning as well, Portland was one of those places that came on the radar as a very interesting city grappling with trying to create livable, walkable neighborhoods. So I went to Portland to see what kind of city it was, but immediately fell in love with the city because it has um, so many progressive policies toward neighborhoods and toward city living, that I became quite interested and moved into Portland and started the second Laughing Planet Cafe in Belmont area, very hip neighborhood. And eventually, the second one, I believe, is in Eugene. When we opened another one in Eugene, and it did very well. And then Corvallis, and then a bunch more in Portland, only to find out that I was having trouble with my heart and needed bypass surgery, needed major intervention. And my cardiologist said, maybe you should retire and take it easy because your heart is not strong. So I sold the business, but was bored, so started a hamburger restaurant because I couldn't not do something.
Right.
And this hamburger restaurant is now, I sold it, or I actually gave it away. I gave it to my business partner Barbara, and she sold it, and now she's retired and I'm retired, but I get free hamburgers forever. So it works out very well.
So
And I'm happy. I'm happy that the businesses I've created are all still there, still doing interesting things, and still following the mission of creating healthy food, not too expensive, mostly suitable to people. Like in America, we eat our food on the run,
right.
not sitting down with a normal group of people. And
For 2 hours, 3 hours,
exactly,
until 2 a.m.
exactly. And this the burrito idea I had was entirely something we called a PND, a portable nutrition device, something you could carry in your pack or something, and when you needed to have dinner, it was right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still doing well, as you probably visited Laughing Planet. So
Yeah.
I enjoyed doing it and became reasonably good at restaurants, I guess, even though I really didn't start knowing anything special. It was mostly learn on the job and listen to customers. And we do have in America a culture that encourages entrepreneurial innovation. So it's easy to start a business. If you have a crazy idea, go ahead and start a business. And if you're smart, you can make it work. And if you are interested in what people are thinking about, and if you listen, they will tell you what they want. And this is very interesting for me. And even now, as I am more retired, it's very difficult for me to sit still and not want to look at a new business opportunity. Or I see all the empty spaces in parts of Portland and Eugene, for that matter, and I think, ooh, that would be a good restaurant space. And then I realized, no, I better stop. And my long-term plan, and my plan really until the epidemic started, was to relocate to Catalonia somewhere, and connect with my fiancee Laura, and live somewhere maybe in the Alta Empordà area, somewhere near Caganers and my friends and
Mhm.
things like that. So now it's been just we're stuck here in the United States waiting, as everybody is all over the world,
Yeah.
waiting for the epidemic to change, to finally be less important. And then my goal will be to come to Catalonia as soon as I can and begin looking for a house. My interest is something on the order of an older farmhouse near a town, but not in a town. And
Will you be
I will.
thinking? Will you be thinking business? Are you going to be looking at the open spaces, available spaces, the
I
same
can't.
kind of?
Yeah, I can't help it. That's just my way.
Yeah.
And there are people who who can use work and jobs, and I have friends whose sons are able-bodied young guys that would be great to work with. So if the situation arose, I would consider it. We know of people who have to rethink their businesses because of the pandemic, especially in food. If Catalonia is not, as I understand it, that excited, except in the city, about takeaway food. Um, but now it's all there is, and if you adjust, you can adjust how you run your business. So maybe I will help people, maybe I will consult, as long as they speak English. Um, this is the greatest failure of my life, that I don't understand Catalan yet. I will, but it's something I have to work at, because to me it's a complicated language. Doesn't sound easy.
Right. But Spanish, you understand a little bit. I mean,
Yeah, I
it
can
kind
do
of builds
well.
off of that a little bit.
Yeah, I can do well enough with Spanish. Enough, not great. And a lot of my friends in Catalonia speak quite good English. Um, and some of them many of them are artists. And this is one of the reasons I love Catalonia. Also, is the integration of arts into everything there. I mean, people do things that are not normal in America, but seemingly normal. For fiance Laura, for instance, is also a poet and performs in public spaces. And people have choruses and cooking groups and things like this. This is a peculiar way of socializing to Americans, but to Catalans, it's normal.
That's
And
it. I've
hmm?
always seen that there's like meetups or different groups. Like, yeah, there has to be a reason kind of to meet new people. Like when
Right.
we came here, we didn't know anybody. I looked at things on Meetup or Facebook or different places, and common interests. I thought common interests like cooking and stuff would be something. For me, it was sports, like different pickup sports. But
Right.
you're saying that's not you don't see that here.
Not as much. I mean, there are obviously sort of attempts at it, and some activities like sports serve that same purpose when you're young. I don't know if they still do, but when I was a young guy, I played in Little League baseball and all the different sports, and so that was one way to socialize. But for Americans, the idea of having dinner with your whole family happens maybe twice, three times a year. It's not every night. And now when Laura is here, she is always saying, "Oh, well, it's time for dinner," which means sitting down and talking and having a glass of wine. Which for Americans, it's grab what's in the refrigerator and eat while you're walking to your car.
Yeah.
This is how
Uh,
it works here. It's a very peculiar world, and now that the politics have gotten even stranger, it has given me more reason to want to leave. The real reason is to escape what I see as an intolerable political situation, and one that, as we speak now, is not even decided. But it's pretty clear Biden will win the presidency, but I don't know if he can undo the damage, which is so severe and so much more than Americans understand. That I feel like better off living in Catalonia and watching from a distance what's going on here. Peculiar time, as you know, and
yeah.
as people in Catalonia are extremely worried about the elections here. Many of my friends are texting me and WhatsApping me about what's going on. What do you know? And we don't know. We're living in a state of confusion here, and anxiety too. Americans are very anxious right now, and I think this is appearing in various mental health problems. Well, everybody's having problems with being stuck in the house.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's an interesting time, all things considered, and to me, a good time to move to Europe. So,
I'm optimistic. I agree with your sentiment that if there's some uncertainty, and this guy that's the current president right now is trying to pull out the stops, but I don't see it how he can keep it going.
Well, the problem is that he will not win election, but the philosophy he represents is everywhere. And there were more people who voted for him this time than the last time.
Yeah.
So there's half the country lives in a fantasy land, and the other half is completely confused and puzzled how that's possible. So
Right.
there's not even an opportunity for a good conversation with people you don't agree with. And this is to me the ultimate danger, because when people stop talking, and you have a culture with so many weapons, this whole Second Amendment craziness, it's a recipe for problems. And I'm certain, and I hope I'm not right, but I'm certain there will be an upsurge in violence in the next few months, just with people thinking that the election was stolen, that people, are our enemies who are not our enemies. So
Right.
it's a terrible time, but I hope I'm wrong, and I hope you're right.
Yeah.
It's you guys have to make your future, and
Yeah.
I think being in the resilience business is a good business to be in.
Right. I mean, when you mentioned that there's a problem where there's not even communication between two groups that seem very far apart, or at least the extremes, right? Because whenever I see that the kind of the extremes, I try to remind myself that it's the news or it's the social media that focuses on those extremes, because that gets more eyeballs and that gets more attention, and that's where we're focused on. But yes, I agree with you that more people voted for him this year than 4 years ago, and that's something that we have to think about. But the other part was how there's an opportunity there. How do we, the same way you said, when you see empty buildings downtown in Eugene, you say, "Oh, this is a perfect spot for a restaurant." If someone can figure out that solution to bring people together, or I don't know, my head, my brain's already spinning, trying to think how do we connect these people, and maybe it's not necessarily a business, but there's got to be something there. I don't know.
I agree. There are always opportunities, even in the dimmest of times, and sometimes you can make a strong moral statement working on something that is important, as well as a good business opportunity. This is always my idea. In the United States, that's not so difficult, but now I'm not sure. I mean, a good example is where I live in the country. Is now pretty much Trump country. It's definitely not the urban, upper educated guys, but at the same time, the neighbors I know in my area are really decent people. And in spite of the fact that we're not on the same political page, I respect them, and think there must be a way for us to talk, because there's already some connections in that we live on the same property and have the same problems with our animals and with the fire and with all these things going on. So there is an opportunity, and this is possible. But the problem is, and watch how this unfolds in the next few weeks, that Trump will do more damage to the underlying systems, to the way our political system functions. And I don't know enough about how Spain and Catalonia work. I do know, of course, that Catalonia is not very happy about being a colony of Spain. But at the
Mm,
same time, here in the United States, there are there are things that you can do, the president can do without any oversight, that puts people in positions, in judges and in regulatory places, that the damage will last for decades. And even Joe Biden is not going to be able to fix this. Maybe Kamala Harris will, because she's a very intelligent and very good candidate. But the work to clean up this mess isn't just Trump's mess. That's the problem. It stretches all the way back to when the Republicans rewrote the rules in order to make them have all the power, in order to give them the power. And that's the real issue here. It's not so much Trump, it's the long term trends in democracy and capitalism that are endangering things, because there's too much disparity of wealth. There are too many people that are just not, that their needs are not at all being taken account of. It's embarrassing when I see the homeless people in Portland and in Eugene. I'm embarrassed. We have the richest nation in the world in history, and we can't find shelter for people who need it. I don't get it. So, as I said, a lot of my personal interest is, well, I think it's time for me to live in a place where there are more social values I agree with. So this is Catalonia for me.
right.
And the other thing is, in Catalonia, they love cycling and they love rugby. So I'm good.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I see myself in the future, 5, 10 years. I don't know. Also going to Catalonia at some point, but I still remain optimistic about the U.S. and trying to see there's got to be some way.
Well,
I mean, the other thing I think of is there's a lot of people that voted for Trump. There's also still a lot of people that didn't vote at all, even with
yes,
this was the most votes total ever in the U.S. history, and there's
right,
still a lot of people that were. And I have friends that I know didn't vote, and they still
right.
said both are mean nothing to me, and I'd rather vote Kanye West or something. And it's like, um,
Yeah. Well,
so
I
I think
understand.
there's a third way there to try and get these
Yeah,
people.
and the real problem is that the problems I mentioned about the United States are actually problems of all advanced capitalist nations. Some are doing better than others at addressing these things, but in the end, the long term, the almost the internal logic of how the history of capitalism works generates this sort of end game. And trying to untangle things and figure out where to go from here, you really need people who can think outside the box. I don't see Joe Biden doing that, unfortunately, because he's just too much a part of the earlier generation. His values are too early, and the nation has changed too much, just as Europe is changing with more immigration and more concern about things like this. Um, this is the problem. So you young guys better get on this and step in. But you're going to have your hands full, and on top of it all, with climate change, oh my goodness. Um, but I admire what you do in the work you're doing, because um, you're working on sustainable food, and this is one of the great problems going forward. So
Uh,
good luck.
uh, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, everything counts, and I think there's a lot more young people that are more active, uh, and I think it's going to be not going to be relying on government systems and electing someone and then saying, okay, well now they're going to do stuff. No, it's
Right. They're going to
keep,
solve our problems. No,
no, it's
that's
not.
exactly right.
Yeah, it's got
And
to keep putting the pressure on them.
right. That's typically what happens when civilizations um, disintegrate or collapse or whatever you want to call it. And that's not as frightful a term as people think it is. It just means that you go from um, a, a very complex set of conditions to a much simpler set of conditions, where you find alternative ways to accomplish things than the normal complex markets. In other words, you trade with people. You have somebody like I have a pig. I can trade with my neighbors for things I might need. That's going to really encourage. That's going to happen a lot more. And what will need to happen is people will need to bond together in sort of little sub-regional clusters to work together. And there will be folks that do quite well in this, and there will be folks that are completely mystified, and they won't know what hit them. It'll be like being in a meteor, and God knows what that'll do. Sometimes I root for the meteor, though. Clean up everything all at once. But then again, I'm an old fart. So, I've already had a lot of fun in my life, and you guys still have more fun to have. So
yeah, more fun, but it looks like we got some work to do.
Yeah, work to do. Exactly. My generation was really kind of grew up in a little bubble of time where everybody could get further ahead than their parents, and there were jobs for everybody, and going to the university was actually useful. This was an interesting time. We were very lucky, and we were also very selfish because we left you guys a mess. So we're going to have to, the only good thing is that those of us, as we move along, need to leave our money to organizations that are going to try to clean up this mess, because we didn't do it when we were, of age. Now we need to fund all the rich people who have any conscience at all, need to fund environmental organizations and organizations that are going to try to make part of the world livable again.
Right. No.
So,
yeah. No,
yeah.
and I think it's tough because everyone wants to help and think of others, but in the end, we're all thinking about first ourselves. Are we okay? And then others. And with that generation where there was a boom, there's a lot of people born in the same time period. I think this is just from sociology, anthropology. Like there are so many from that age group that they were able to say, okay, we choose, we decide, we're the majority, right? And that it's resulted in, just the example is all the presidents in the last 20, 30 years have all been boomers, or baby boomers, including Obama. I had to double check with Obama, but Obama was on the tail end of that. Yep. And so it's really just numbers. It's a numbers thing. And
and the bigger problem is that our generation tends to think that's the way stuff is, instead of realizing that you need to really rethink all the paradigms that we live by, including, the main thing is figuring out what we're going to do about climate change. The good news is apparently population is already trending downward. So we're not quite gonna overrun the world with people, but there are too many people still, and too many people in horrible conditions that have nowhere to go. And this is the real challenge of the developed world: is what can we do about the conditions we created in the underdeveloped world, especially since we stole most of the wealth from them, including people. We built our economies on the backs of these colonies, well, and including Catalonia. So
Catalonia, U.S. It's the same
Yeah,
story, different groups of people.
Yeah, and this brings me back to my anthropology, where I think, somewhere along the lines we should have stayed more like Neanderthals and not become modern. But the good news is there's a lot of Neanderthal genes in Catalonia, so I'm also proud of that. I'm happy.
Explain again. When was when you first had your first interaction with the Catalan culture or the Caganers? Explain that story.
Well, the real thing had to do with reading Orwell's Homage to Catalonia book when I was 17 and very impressionable and very opposed to the Vietnam War. My parents were very anti-war at the time. So this was a romantic vision of somebody who put their life on the line for democratic and for Republican principles. So it kind of stuck in my mind as a kind of a romantic vision of if there's ever a time, because in Vietnam, during the Vietnam War, we were struggling with many of the same things going on now, about whether governments are lying to us, whether there are things that you shouldn't be doing, like going into the military, which I would have refused to do if I ever got drafted. But at the same time, when you read this very romantic view of the Republicans defending Barcelona at the last minute, this was something that I thought was kind of an escape fantasy for me. And I remember thinking very clearly that, God, I hope they have another fight with Spain, because this time I'll go and be on the right side of history. Now, I'm told by everybody that Catalans are just too peaceful. They don't like violence. So I don't think this is going to happen. But it was always something that whenever the word Catalunya or Catalan or anything would come up in what I was reading or just conversation, my ears would perk up, because it was already something that had deeply embedded in my brain. And as I said, the area that first led me to Barcelona, specifically, was urban planning. When I was that phase of my life where I was doing things and studying how cities can be much better places to live than they typically are in the United States. So I came to Barcelona a few times to look at how many of the things happened there, and the old villages, and how they all conglomerated. And I guess at some point I stumbled into the idea that there were Caganers there, or maybe I was there at Christmas and saw this, and it's genuinely puzzling, but at the same time very funny. And to dig into it was it was kind of a door opening to many facets of Catalan culture, including I was honored to join the Amics del Caganer, a group of people. Just like everything else in Catalonia, there are clubs and groups and things celebrating some aspect of the culture. So there was this rather large group of collectors who were vastly amused that an American was so interested in these peculiar little customs. But they all welcomed me into their world, and would invite me to their homes to see their collections, which would give me another avenue into somebody's background and history. And some of these guys come together from all over Catalonia, so there's a lot of little micro traditions that I was exposed to. But this really was the entryway into meeting a lot of people, and to this day, one of my close friends is Joan Laterras, who's the past president of the Amics, who is just a wonderful guy, speaks great English, and who we stay in touch all the time. He's come to visit me in Portland, and we will always go to dinner as soon as I'm back in Catalonia. So this is an example of how the club, the organization, like a casal, led me into many different aspects and opened the doors to some of the other traditions. And the more I'm there, the more interesting things I learn, and particularly the various villages that have their peculiar fiestas and their own celebrations of their history. Some of which it's just great fun. I mean, basically, it's an excuse to have a party, and you can't fault that. That's just, Catalans are very sociable people, and are if you show the tiniest bit of respect, if you learn to say something in Catalan, they're delighted. So it's just a nice group. I love my friends there. As I said, I have more friends there than here, and particularly in the art world, somehow I got connected with people doing art. And there's a sculptor there, Nico Nubiola, who is a brilliant sculptor and just a heck of a good guy. And we've had quite a lot of fun drinking and carousing and doing all these things. So You know, I can't beat it. I wish America would enjoy more of the things that Catalonia, where it's normal in Catalonia. I think, you know, the people I have brought to Catalonia and exposed, the Americans that have come with me to travel, are all delighted and also understand my enjoyment. I don't need to explain it to them, but to other people, okay, it takes a while to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe when I buy my house near Cadaqués, I'll have room to bring many Americans over and stay at my house, and I can teach them what they need to learn.
Right. Well, the Catalan culture and the way the kind of the way that you've been able to interact with them, right?
Yeah. And again, I have so many friends that are very warm and open that it's never a problem to get a good party going there. And you know, the other great thing is I've sort of been adopted into one of the families where the Nubiola clan has several folks doing very interesting things, nephews and cousins and extended family. So when they at one of the parties they said I was now officially a member of their family. So I feel good, and we'll soon get my residency card, and as soon as the pandemic is over, I'm out of here.
Well, tell us about a little bit more about your Caganer collection. Do you have any like rare Caganers, like unique ones? You showed us the one was specifically made like you. Do you have other
Yeah,
ones?
we're gonna send you, or there are a lot of photographs. Nothing really rare, other than my own. And at one point, the people in Cadaqués made one of my favorite baseball player, Derek Jeter, back in the day when um, he was I'm a lifelong Yankees fan, being from New York,
Uh-huh.
and as a special treat, one Christmas, I came to their booth over by the Sagrada Familia, and they had done this for me just as a favor. And you know, I was just delighted. So I said, "Oh, it looks just like him, and a really, really good talent." So I asked them if they could make one of me, and they made this one. So these are my special ones, but
Uh-huh.
this one I hope will go away soon.
Are you gonna
Um,
keep it or?
Yeah, I keep it, but I think I'll have him lay on his side or something. And I don't have Joe Biden yet, but I'm sure there'll be Biden. Well, will there be the Christmas markets this year?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I assume they'll still make them, and I don't know if
Yeah,
they'll be online or.
yeah, but the problem is I guess the city is closed down, and Lauer's daughter, who is still in town there, tells us it's very sad that Barcelona is like a ghost town now. So who knows? Maybe they won't even have the market. I suspect they won't. Um,
Mhm.
but in any case, there are a few. I have one Kagane that's a little unusual because we were going to create do some fake news. We were gonna kind of make this into an ancient something we had dug up, showing that the Romans were worshiping Caganers too. But we're not sure what we're going to do with this yet because we can't get the newspapers to cover it. So I have that. What else do I have? Oh, here's your president, who is, I guess, in Belgium now, right?
Pokemon. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I don't know, nothing rare. Many soccer players, many rugby players.
Mhm.
No, nothing too rare right now. I don't know. What else can I tell you about?
Mhm.
Um,
I had another question about from going back to the business stuff. Does it require a lot of capital um, to get these restaurants started? Because
it can. It depends, but in every case, if you the first ones I did, I had no capital, so you know I just basically did it on personal labor and had a few friends who believed in it help me. Um, But normally you do need capital, and it helps if you can buy equipment, because in the end I had to buy the equipment anyway. It just took a few years of saving money to be able to become a modern restaurant. But I was very lucky because, well, maybe not lucky, maybe this was a good idea. I designed a system. The restaurant is based on.
Hello, Richard. We lost Richard. Hello, Richard. I lost Richard here. All right. We'll give him a second, se no. C'è stato un episodio da Fora da Catalunya, famiglia, e poi tindrem una altra entrevista amb Richard aviat. Família.